Hello and welcome to episode 069 of the Beacon broadcast. It's January 21st, 2024. I have been playing and buying games, as I often do. And this week, as for a new pickup to my collection, I have here, just arrived at my doorstep shortly before I got home, I have Freedom Wars Remastered. I feel like I talked about this already, but maybe I talked about it to myself in my head. But this is a remaster, a port of a previously PlayStation Vita exclusive game. This is a first-party Sony game, but interestingly, the modern port of this on PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch is published by Bandai Namco and licensed by Sony Interactive Entertainment Incorporated. It's also developed by the developer Dimps. Dimps is kind of one of those third-party work-for-hire developers, and they, at least in my memory, I know them from the Sonic Advance games. Sonic Advance 1, 2, and 3 on the Game Boy Advance. So Freedom Wars Remastered is it's a hunting game at its core, so it's similar to something like God Eater, Monster Hunter, and Soul Sacrifice. It does have more of an emphasis on kind of story, which I understand is kind of cliche anime stuff, but it's a unique concept where basically you are born as a sinner into this dystopian future world scenario, and you're basically, for being born, your punishment is like 1,000,000 years of like some life sentence. And what you can do is you can take on these missions and jobs and hunt these monsters and rescue VIPs and things like that to lower your sentence. And the goal is to get your sentence to, I guess, 0. I never played the original Vita release. Well, I think I booted it up, and at that point I wasn't really into the hunting genre yet, and so it didn't really click with me, so I quickly shelved the original Vita version. But I thought I would give the PlayStation 5 version a chance. Now, this release, it was only available, or it wasn't available physically here in the United States, unfortunately, only digital here in the US. So I had to import an Asia English version from, I believe I got this from Video Games Plus, who I believe gets it from Play Asia. And from Video Games Plus, this is it's like it's made for a Western release. Everything is in English, so it's nice. It just doesn't have the ESRB logo, which, is kind of a bummer. But I will take this over nothing for sure. So thank you, PlayStation and Bandai Namco Asia, for still putting out these physical releases for games we wouldn't otherwise have physicals for. Speaking of Asia, I have been playing a new game that I started this past week, and that would be Ghost of Tsushima from the developer Sucker Punch, who's known for developing the Sly Cooper games, as well as the Infamous series of games as well on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. Ghost of Tsushima was their big kind of late generation release on the PlayStation 4. It eventually got ported to PlayStation 5 as the Director's Cut, which came as essentially the complete edition of the game, which includes the Iki Island expansion built into the base game. And Ghost of Tsushima is about this samurai, Jin Sakai. And long story short, the game starts off, basically all the other samurai on this island, Tsushima, are killed in this attack by the Mongols, and Jin is fighting back to retake the island with the help of some unlikely people. And this game has been a tremendous amount of fun for me. It's been kind of a nice refreshing change of pace from Dragon Quest III HD 2D. It's kind of a in a lot of ways, it's not too different from, your average open world game with the collectibles and the, taking over forts and freeing the villagers and, opening up the map, that kind of thing. But I guess where it does particularly excel is the story. It also excels in the combat. The samurai combat is really great. You've got these 4 stances, or at least I have these 4 stances that I can kind of switch between on the fly mid-combat that allow you to tackle enemies using different kinds of weapons. Each stance has its own kind of move set. I mean, they're not too different from each other. You're either pressing square to do a light attack, triangle to do a heavy attack, but you can also parry, and you can dodge as well, and you can kind of do counter attacks, parry attacks, and you can get like perfect parries that have these awesome like kind of cinematic kills. I think maybe my favorite thing is that you can almost always initiate a combat scenario with a group of enemies with a standoff, and that's where you have that like old school style samurai, his blade is just holding in his hand, and then as the enemy approaches with one strike, just takes out the enemy. And it's been a lot of fun to do that, and you can eventually unlock these abilities that let you chain multiple of these like single samurai standoff strikes in a row. So you'll slash one enemy, and it kind of does this cool slow-mo thing, and then another enemy runs up to you, and then you get the timing just right, you slash him, and then a third one, you slash a third one, and then the game kind of goes back to real time, and at the same time all 3 of the enemies sort of like fall to their knees, and they're gushing blood out of different parts of their body, and it's awesome. So I've been having a lot of fun with Ghost of Tsushima. I have a feeling this game is going to take me probably through February to finish, so I'll check in every couple of weeks. Maybe I've got some kind of new experience I want to share with you guys about the game. So tonight, Insomniac Games is putting up tickets for their 30th anniversary event. So shortly after I finish recording this episode, I will be hopefully securing these tickets. They're going to be given away via the Eventbrite platform, which is known for having issues in my experience when it's a very in-demand ticket. So depending on how many tickets they have, there's a good chance I might be unlucky and not get through here, just depending on if the website wants to work for me at the right time. So we'll see how that goes, but I hope to be reporting back next week that I'll be attending the event. And then on February 1st, I believe it is, I'll the episode after that, I'll definitely have a full report for you all on how that event is going. Not going to open up a booster pack in Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket today. As I said last week, there's like no new cards for me to get. I'm mostly just waiting on this next set, which is supposed to be coming sometime this month. So maybe next week there will be a new booster pack series out in the app. So we'll check it out then. We have got a lot of news, including maybe one of the most anticipated stories of the last, year and a half since we started this podcast. And that is the Nintendo Switch 2 has been announced. It finally happened. They unveiled the Nintendo Switch successor, and I'm so glad that I can finally stop referring to this mystery console as the Nintendo Switch successor and just call it what it always has been, what I knew it would be called, Nintendo Switch 2. So on the morning of Thursday, January 16th, Nintendo uploaded the first look trailer to their YouTube channel and social media networks. In the trailer, you can see an original Nintendo Switch transforming and morphing into the Nintendo Switch 2, kind of like the Animorphs did. That's one for all my 90s listeners. So of the new details and features the trailer kind of shows off, here's what we're looking at. So there's a new and improved kickstand in the device. There is also now an extra USB port on top of the console, presumably so you can charge from the top while you're playing a tabletop mode or maybe in bed. It was always kind of awkward to have the charging cable sticking out of the bottom. There's a larger screen, which of course is good. There's still some bezels The bezels is the kind of that black area between the ends of the device and the kind of black border. So there's still a significant bezel there, but the screen is much larger. The whole device itself has grown. So the Joy-Cons as well are larger, and they have a new method for attaching to the console. No longer do they slide up and down the rails to slot them in. They kind of go at the sides of the Switch with a special port. Apparently, we're still going to kind of have that snappy sort of sound, so we'll have to see how that plays out. There seems to only be one major innovation. Nintendo's known for innovating in the hardware space. They haven't always, but it looks like we're getting kind of a small, but I think significant and important innovation. In the trailer, they hint at the ability to use the Joy-Con like as a mouse, like you would on a computer. It shows the Joy-Con attaching to a small piece of plastic of some kind, or I'm not sure if it's plastic, but that then allows the Joy-Con to run over flat surfaces like a table or a mouse pad, a desk, or whatever. So I think they don't explicitly say, hey, you can use the Joy-Con like a mouse, but they're heavily hinting at it here. I think this is a pretty smart move that should allow for some games that have been traditionally only on PC to come over to Switch. It will also open up new play methods for existing games that would benefit from mouse support. Think of something like Pikmin. That's definitely like an RTS, and they've always had a pretty good method for like doing RTS like things in the Pikmin games, but this could open up new ways to play games like that. Though presumably you are going to need to be sitting at a desk or something like that to play games with the Joy-Con as a mouse. I know there's a new version of Roller Coaster Tycoon coming out for Nintendo Switch that's ports over the original classic games, and actually having mouse support in something like that rather than using the controller stick to mimic a mouse cursor, which is always kind of slow and clunky compared to just quick, fast mouse movements. That's pretty exciting. The trailer then pivots to a few seconds of footage of a new untitled Mario Kart game. There's not a whole lot to really glean from the footage other than that it looks incredible, but some eagle-eyed gamers did spot Donkey Kong sporting a new look, one that's more similar to his appearance in the recent Mario movie from Illumination and Nintendo, rather than his Donkey Kong Country look that Rare established back in the mid-early 90s. Near the end, it announces a Nintendo Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd, 2025. So, which means we're not getting any more details from Nintendo for another 2.5 months. It's gonna be brutal to wait this long, and then we'll likely have to wait until then for a release date and pre-orders as well. One thing that the trailer did clear up that I'm happy it did is that it announces that the Nintendo Switch 2 is backwards compatible with Nintendo Switch games, both physically and digitally. So that means the Nintendo Switch 2 is presumably also going to be getting physical games as well in the form of cartridges. So the cartridge slot in the Nintendo Switch 2 will likely take both of the same cartridges. One thing we don't know is that will the new cartridge for Nintendo Switch 2 be shaped a little differently, kind of like the 3DS cartridges were, so they can't fit into the older DS models or the older Switch model in this case. But it's good as a fan of physical. We know that at least Nintendo is doing one more cycle. I think Nintendo will be the last holdout. I think Nintendo Switch 3 or whatever comes after Nintendo Switch 2 will also likely take physical games, but it remains to be seen. We're a ways off from that, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. So what did I think about the reveal announcement? Well, I thought, honestly, the video was kind of boring. I think Nintendo intentionally did that because they really wanted to hammer home and communicate that this is a new console and not some light upgrade to the Nintendo Switch. That's obvious just from the name alone, Nintendo Switch 2. They're going the Sony route for the first time. It's kind of crazy to think that this will be the first time that Nintendo makes a numbered successor to one of their consoles. You could maybe argue that Nintendo DS is Nintendo DS 1, and then Nintendo DSi is Nintendo DS 2, and that Nintendo 3DS is Nintendo DS3, and that one technically has a number. But then that all goes out the window because of the Nintendo 2DS, which is a 3DS without the 3D. So yeah, I don't buy that argument at all. So yeah, Nintendo Switch 2. I think they've hit this winning combination, this winning formula. Let's just iterate on this great idea. Now, they're really concerned about having the Wii U problem all over again, and this should hopefully help them avoid it. For those of you that don't remember, a lot of consumers thought the Wii U was just some like extra attachment for your Wii, and basically there was a whole bunch of marketing confusion, and the Wii U just flopped traumatically and dramatically and forced Nintendo to abandon the console and move on to the Nintendo Switch 2, or to the original Nintendo Switch. So aside from that, we need more details to like really be like super crazy excited. On the hardware, the specs of the machine, what is it capable, what kind of games can we see running on it. Now, between now and April, we probably will have some leaks. Developers are really going to start getting their hands on this, and hopefully that will give us a better idea of things. I do wonder if publishers will be allowed to publishers and developers can announce their games for Nintendo Switch 2. We have not seen any of that yet. I have a feeling Nintendo is probably telling people, no, you gotta wait till our Nintendo Direct comes out, and then the floodgates can just open. So one last thing they announced is that Nintendo will host in-person events around the globe from April to early June, where people can go hands-on with the Nintendo Switch 2. They are calling this the Nintendo Switch 2 Experience. Here's a list of locations and dates. So in North America, you can experience this in New York from April 4th to 6th, in Los Angeles from April 11th to 13th, from Dallas, April 25th to 27th, Toronto, April 25th through 27th. Europe, we've got Paris, London, Milan, Berlin, Madrid, and Amsterdam. Oceania, you've got Melbourne. In Asia, you've got Tokyo, Seoul, Hong Kong, and Taipei. Again, these dates go mostly in April, some in May, and then just a little bit in June at the end there, it looks like. So something that we can glean from these dates is that it's likely that the Nintendo Switch 2 won't be launching until sometime in June at the absolute earliest. I just don't really see them hosting these events at the same time as the console being available. I feel like this is something that comes before. They'll have more events where the console will be out and it will be playable at different demo stations and events around the country. I'm sure they're going to be back at Comic-Con in a big way this year and other events like that. So if you're hoping to attend one of these events, you will need to register your interest at experience.nintendo.com. You can pick the date and time you would like to attend a particular location, and then enter the lottery for a chance to be selected for the 2.5-hour experience. That's a pretty lengthy experience, so they must be planning, the fact that they're letting people know, hey, this is about 2.5 hours, they must have like a rigorous plan about what you're going to be doing while you're there, and how much time they expect you to spend at each station or at each experience. So I've entered with a group of friends, and I hope we get selected. Obviously, there's no guarantee here. Anticipation is off the charts. In the first 72 hours, the announcement video on YouTube surpassed both the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and original Nintendo Switch in terms of views and likes by a significant margin. It was over 30-some million views, I believe. So, I mean, the hype is off the charts. Even if the reception so far to the announcement has been kind of like tepid, people are sort of like, well, that was kind of a boring announcement. And I think that's a fair response to have. But I would say, hey, wait for the big Nintendo Direct. Then I think they're going to blow us away with what this thing can do. If you do want to go, you only have until January 26th to enter the deadline. So be sure to do so before then. Otherwise, you won't even have a chance to go. We're going to shift gears over to Sony. So in 2022, we got word that Sony had 12 live service games in development slated for release by this year, 2025. Last year, two of those games finally released. Helldivers, which ended up being a big hit for Sony, and Concord, which was the opposite of a big hit. Concord was so poorly received that they took the game offline and refunded all players only 3 or 4 days after its release. Concord spooked Sony pretty hard. Following a recent internal review reported on by Bloomberg, Sony has decided to cancel two of these in-development live service projects at their first-party studios. First up, we have Bend Studios, located in Bend, Oregon. These are the developers of Siphon Filter, SOCOM, and Days Gone, and they were working on a new live service shooter game. That project has now been canceled. This has got to be a big blow to the studio and their morale. The studio had wanted to develop a sequel to their game Days Gone a few years ago, but after pitching it, they were told no by Papa Sony. Bluepoint Games, the developers of the Demon's Souls remake, which released alongside the PlayStation 5 in November of 2020, was also working on a live service game. This one was using the God of War intellectual property from Sony Santa Monica. Both these studios have spent the past 3 to 5 years working on these games, and now it's likely that we won't ever see an original game from them again until PlayStation 6. That's crazy. Sony did confirm that these studios would not be shuttered, and they hope to pivot staff to new projects ASAP, so any interruptions to business would be minimal. So I'm going to choose to look at the bright side here. The studios aren't closing, staff are seemingly not going to be laid off, and two live service games are, dead before arrival, which, this is a better outcome if Sony felt that there was no hope for these two games, and let's say they just pushed through, released the games anyways, and they were bad or players didn't like them, and they just abandoned them, that would be a really big mess. So hopefully these studios can get to work on a non-live service, single-player action-adventure game. The thing that PlayStation is really known for being good at. Before we move on, I want to look at a list put together by internet user Game Sharir of several live service projects we had known were in some stage of development at PlayStation and where they stand today. So this goes back to the last few years, and it's going to include some released games. So Arrowhead Game Studio released Helldivers 2 in February of 2024. Bend Studios' unannounced games as a service game, canceled, we know that now. Bluepoint Games' God of War games as a service game, canceled, we know that now. Bungie has been developing a game called Marathon for the last several years, supposedly releasing this year, but we have not heard from them in a while about the status of the game. Bungie had another game that was codenamed Payback, set in the Destiny universe, also canceled last year. Firesprite was working on a Twisted Metal games as a service game. That was canceled last year. Firewalk, they released the game Concord, canceled and studio closed. Guerrilla Games is working on a Horizon Online title, and this game is still, unannounced, and its status or its fate seems to be, stable for the time being. Haven Studios, they're working on a game called Fair Games, and it's another multiplayer kind of, team-based action shooter game. We haven't heard anything on this game in a while, so seemingly still in development. We know Insomniacs was pitching a Spider-Man games as a service, live service game called Spider-Man the Great Web, or at least, internally titled that, and that was canceled. It never pushed forward. And we know London Studio was working on a fantasy multiplayer title, and this game was canceled and the studio was closed just days before Jim Ryan retired, if you all remember. And then Naughty Dog, The Last of Us Factions Online. This game was canceled in 2023. So if it's not obvious, Jim Ryan's push of PlayStation into the live service space has obviously been a massive, massive flop and transmission.